this video, I'm going to talk about the history of a city transforming into a metropolitan area. And it's specifically going to be about Amarillo, Texas. And the reason why I want to cover Amarillo, Texas is because it's located in the Plains region of the United States and is traditionally a town that's called a mid-sized city. However, the structure of the city and the historical events that led to the city's population growth was very common in the United States. The city is less than 300,000 in population currently. However, it stood out amongst other cities in the Plains region of the United States, specifically the New Mexico, Oklahoma, and Kansas Panhandle region. Amarillo was a city that hosted many firsts in the United States. For example, the first independent junior college was Amarillo College. And what I mean by that is prior to Amarillo College being an independent junior college, every junior college was associated with a school district. So whatever school district was associated with that high school or middle school or elementary, that junior college was also associated with that school district. Amarillo College was the first junior college that was not associated with a school district. The school that's currently known as West Texas A&M University was previously known as West Texas Normal College. And even though it's in Canyon, Texas, it's still a part of the Amarillo metropolitan area. And that West Texas Normal College was the first college that offered a bachelor's and a master's degree in education. Amarillo, Texas was also the location of the first shopping center in the United States. The Holland Park Village was the first shopping center in the United States. Also, Amarillo College was and is currently home to the largest family-owned bank in the United States, which is Amarillo National Bank. The structure of the city and the economic areas within the city implicate how the city functioned prior to 1970, 1980, when marketing and entertainment and other aspects of the U.S. economy started to accelerate. Amarillo was an area that was known for being very rural prior to becoming a city. The reason why the area is important or was important is because it was the location of the last battle that took place that was associated with the Red River War. The Battle of Paladero was the last battle of the Red River War. After that battle took place, the conflict behavior in the area subsided and the area was mostly occupied by people that traded or did some type of exploration, being that it was pretty much the frontier. People that would explore Amarillo. Also, it was a place where the railroads would switch over and take their cars from one area to another. The Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe Railroad, AT and SF, it traveled to the western region, whereas the Fort Worth and the Denver City Railway traveled to another direction. People noticed the opportunity to create new tracks that would make a connection between the two railways. And the idea was very forward thinking because currently the Burlington Northern Santa Fe Railroad was a merger between those past railroads. The Fort Worth and Denver City Railway ended up being the Burlington Northern Railway, whereas the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe Railway ended up being the Santa Fe Railway. So the merger between Burlington Northern and Santa Fe is the current corporation known as Burlington Northern Santa Fe, or BNSF. And Amarillo tracks were important because those two mergers, even before the merger, could share tracks and send whatever goods needed to be sent in different areas. Cattle was sent through rails on railways prior to the 1900s and prior to the emergence of the transportation industry. So one reason why the cattle industry emerged in Amarillo was the large section of land, and also because of the opportunity for cattle to be sent by rail cars to a different area. The railway leased land to farmers, specifically land that wasn't being used or occupied by rail tracks. And that was supplemental income for those landowners. So the railroad would lease land to these farmers, and they could actually cultivate the land to make money. So the three major industries in Amarillo upon its inception in 1887 to 1910 were the agriculture industry, the railroad industry, and the cattle industry. These industries occupied an area near the Oklahoma Panhandle. However, Amarillo is landlocked between smaller cities, so the boundaries of Amarillo were between the smaller cities and the areas that were predominantly operated by the railroad. The cattle ranchers, they occupied land north of town in the northern area, whereas society developed near the rail tracks. Prior to Amarillo becoming a city, railroad workers would live in tents near the railways, and the area where those tents were at is in proximity close to where the city developed. The city was originally developed in 1887, and it was named after the lake, which is currently known as Wild Horse Lake. Previously, it was known as Amarillo Lake, and that's where the name Amarillo, Texas comes from. The first government was a general law style government, whereas there was one mayor and 6 aldermen. However, Amarillo was the first city in Texas and the 5th city in the United States to host a city commission style government. In 1910, Amarillo became incorporated as a city. And what that means is Amarillo became a self-governing city, whereas it had its own local standards for the way that the city would function. Being that the city was incorporated, people within the city worked as a community to develop it into something that was conducive to economic and social growth. The first high school was opened in 1922, and the people wanted to transition from it being a 1800 style of city into something that was more modern in terms of the city being conducive to vehicles and modern living in context of what was modern living in the 1900s. So the city developed a specific type of critical infrastructure. The roads were paved with bricks. People, they lived near the downtown area, which included the school and everything that was developing. And also, the city was starting to build in terms of economy, businesses, and culture. From the 1900s into the 1920s, Amarillo created a foundation for growth, whereas Amarillo National Bank was opened, the Amarillo helium plant was opened, and the zinc smeltering company known as ASARCO was opened. So on the outskirts of the city, where the resources were found, such as zinc and helium, is where the helium plant and the zinc smeltering plant were located. So north of town, on the outside of the city, were the cattle ranches, the helium plant, and the zinc plant. On the inside of the city was developing, whereas there was new development and people building their businesses. The first neighborhood in Amarillo was San Jacinto Heights, which is known by residents as San Jacinto. And what's unique about San Jacinto is it is located in an area near the road that was formerly known as Route 66. People transitioned from the area near downtown in Amarillo Lake to San Jacinto in the area near Route 66, and that became the new residential area. So the city started to form from being spread out, whereas you had a village, the Highland Park Village, primarily east of town, the cattle ranch north of town, the helium plant, and the zinc smeltering plant that was north of town as well. Everything started to form, whereas those became the boundaries of the city. From the 1920s to the 1930s, those eras were very difficult for residents in Amarillo due to the Dust Bowl and the financial crisis. Amarillo was the largest city in the area impacted by the Dust Bowl, and even though the challenges were taking place, the city continued to grow. The corporation known as Plains Dairy came into fruition during this era, and so did other prominent companies. Amarillo National contributed a lot of resources to help businesses, families, and to mitigate issues caused by the Dust Bowl and the Great Depression. The city continued to thrive and grow in terms of society during this era, and from the 1930s to the 1940s is when the city developed again. And one reason why is because of the war. The military base was located in the eastern section of the city between Amarillo and the Highland Park Village. So that eastern section, along with northeast sections of the city, were developed for complementing the population growth caused by the military base being added in the city. The east of town was starting to develop, and as I stated before, the northern area, which had the cattle ranch, the helium plant, and the zinc smelting plant, also developing. Additionally, in the southwest region of town, population started to grow. So the population developed near Route 66, started to expand southwest, and that was the first identifiable illustration of urban sprawl, whereas population grew southwest, away from the downtown area, away from the area where it was more rural in the north, and away from the area that was predominantly occupied by military homes in the east. 1940s to the 1950s was another transition, whereas Amarillo became more of a modern society in terms of what was modern in the 1940s and the 1950s. More communities start to develop. Schools were opening to accommodate the growth. A specific school was Carver, and Carver was the school that was dedicated for the black community. The school was opened in 1948, and in 1954, Hilltop was opened because there was a need for a school to take on population in Carver. So as these communities started to grow, there was a demand for services and goods to complement that growth. During the era from the transition of Amarillo becoming a predominantly rural town in the early 1900s to this 1950s era, the black community also started to transition. There was a formal community, which is known as North Heights, came to fruition within this time, and this is where the predominance of the black community lived. And this area was very self-sustaining, and it's an implication of how many communities were during the era, whereas people in the black community went to one dentist or went to see a specific doctor. They bought items at a store in that community, and they obtained their goods and services within that community. As time went on and there was more needs for housing, the city expanded to the south. Specifically, the city expanded south due to more people coming to the city in the 60s because of the Vietnam War. In the 60s, Caprock High School was built to capture that population growth. So Amarillo developed different areas. South side of town, which is predominantly a residential area. The southwest side of town, one of the older communities, so it was economically developed. And the north side of town was also developing, whereas during this era there was a transition of students going from Carver and Hilltop to different schools due to the fact that so many people in the black community were attending these schools. There was a need for more institutions. People were being sent to different schools, specifically Hamlet, Travis, and Robert E. Lee. Students also attended Paladar High School. So this self-sustaining community went from attending two schools to spreading out to different areas that developed near Hamlet, as well as the downtown area, North Heights, San Jacinto, and other areas near those communities. Another factor of economic growth was the introduction of the highways. These major roads was a reason for economic development as well. And specifically between Oklahoma City and Denver, Colorado, Amarillo is the most densely populated area in context of the cities between those two locations. So the economic boom was due to the railroad, it was due to the military, and it was also due to these roads and highways passing through the city. In context of the black community, it was still self-sustaining, but the economic growth wasn't as fast. It was more of a microeconomy. So people in the black community would service retail goods and retail services to the community, such as a barbershop, auto center, a small grocer, retail stores, and also health services that people could receive. North Heights is occupied by homes, but it's also a place where a lot of institutions are at. The person that founded North Heights, Matthew Bones Hooks, receives a lot of accolades for his contributions to the city. Many institutions, neighborhoods, and regions in the city show the names of people that contributed to the city's growth. Many of the high schools are named after locations in the geographical area, such as a Paladero, a Caprock, Tascosa, a River Road, a Bushland, a Canyon. But the middle schools predominantly were named after people that were honored in Texas. Many of those elementaries were named after people that contributed to economic and social growth. Streets were also named after people that contributed to the growth of Amarillo, Texas. One reason why I bring up 1970, the ideas shared in movies and music illustrated the experiences of the black community. For example, the citizens in North Heights experienced the challenges that Marvin Gaye spoke of in his song Inner City Blues. Those social challenges implicated the struggles and the issues that impacted the community within the city, specifically the inner city. They migrated from this North Heights predominantly populated area into other regions, specifically areas near North Heights, such as Hamlet and San Jacinto. And this is the reason why Hamlet and North Heights are predominantly populated by the black community. So urban sprawl in context of greater Amarillo spread it through annexation, through economic development and opportunities, whereas urban sprawl in context of the black community spread it through opportunities and by circumstance. When I say circumstance, I mean people were looking to escape the challenges within the black community.